If you're starting up your studio, one of the biggest decisions to go with is a mixer or an interface. Now, if you ask a group of enthusiasts, you're going to get a bunch of replies based on their personal preference, but not much more than opinion. On the outside, one looks all flashy and cool, and the other looks, well, like a box. But which one is right for you? Does it matter? Let's just find out, why don't we?
This is Aiden Wolf.
Now, if you were to ask this question 10 years back, the answer would be a bit more clear-cut. But as more and more mixers are becoming interfaces, it has become a confusing decision, especially for someone not used to all the gear talk. Traditionally, mixers were, well, mixers. They would take several different signals, mix them all down to one or more signals. They would also allow more of a live mixing environment where you could adjust several aspects of the signal to get the desired outcome. So in layman's terms, this was for musicians. As for the audio interface, it was born out of sound cards for your computer. In fact, that is exactly what they are, but with much more sophisticated technology for converting your audio. Plus, unlike the non-studio versions that actually still exist to this day, you can plug XLR inputs into them. As both are basically the most important decision of a home studio, the differences between the two aren't necessarily clear, other than the looks. But there are a few standout features for each that might guide your decision. First up, inputs. Are you maxing out with no more than 2 microphones, or do you want the ability to expand later on with more? For entry-level interfaces, you're going to have to live with the number of inputs you're given, and for the most part, it's going to be like 1 or 2. However, for the same price, you can get something like the Mackie Pro FX 12 V3, which packs a whole bunch more inputs. But while it might come with more inputs, there's a bit of a steeper learning curve with it, which leads us to ease of use. Most entry-level interfaces are literally dumbed down to as few buttons and knobs as possible just to make life a breeze. Now, this does become less of a thing as you climb the product stack and spend more money, but to start, interfaces can be easy to master. On the other hand, mixers can seem rather overwhelming at times with a whole bunch of buttons and knobs that just seem to complicate even the simplest of things. Now, don't get me wrong, those buttons and knobs add a whole bunch of features and abilities to the board, but if those are features you might not be using right now, well, there's a pretty clear-cut decision to be made. But before you go making your decision, there are a few other things to consider. What about outputs? In most interfaces, especially entry-level brands, you may only have the ability to record 2 outputs, left and right. But if you want to record everything separately, commonly called multi-track, this is something you'll find more so in mixers, especially in the entry-level brands. That being said, one of the best interfaces and all-around tools is the Zoom H5 or H6, which can record multi-track both on the unit itself or on the computer. Now, all that aside, multi-tracking as a feature with a mixer does generally come at a premium compared to other mixers, like the Mackie Pro FX series, all the features, none of the multi-track. And the Studio Live AR8, which costs a couple $100 more, does actually have multi-track ability. Next up is portability. Well, this one should just knock it out of the park for interfaces, right? I mean, come on. Well, not exactly. In fact, a lot of mixers these days actually have onboard recording, meaning you don't need a computer. Sure, this mixer is a whole lot more chonky than this, but drop this anywhere as long as you have power and you can record with it. And on the same lines, real estate on your desk. This one is often overlooked. Mixers can tend to dominate space, and generally you'll find your workflow will dictate how prominent the mixer is on your desk. An interface, though, it's pretty small and discreet. Before you think this isn't that big of a deal, consider this. Some people would actually need to buy a new desk just to fit this mixer beside their monitor. Okay then, what about features? There's little to differentiate these days, especially once the baseline specs are even. But it might be something as simple as faders, which can swing the vote. Personally, I fell into that camp, but sadly, I'm turning into more of a knob guy lately. But baked-in effects might be something you need as a musician, which, by the way, are great onboard a mixer because they don't add any latency to the signal, which can slow down the mix. Though, they may be somewhat limited in cheaper models. Just keep that in mind. Future issues or future-proofing. This one's interesting, and I would love to have a crystal ball to know if this is going to change in the near future. While we've been in this podcasting boom as of late, more and more manufacturers have been releasing podcast-specific mixers. So basically, a feature-rich interface with faders. But once you pass a certain price point, mixers are just mixing consoles for musicians, with no real practical use for a small home studio. PreSonus is a great example. I guess you can pack in the 12-channel, which would be the largest mixer, to compete with an interface. But beyond that, you're only going up in channels. There's no way to get the better preamps without having a 16-channel board or more, which might be overkill for most of your uses. But interfaces, on the other hand, do continue to get better the more you spend, and more feature-rich. So if you're in this for the long run, eventually you will be pressed into a straight-up interface, whether you like it or not. So which one should you buy? Well, as the years have marched on, the two options have really merged, meaning they pretty much do the same things. So perhaps it really isn't an issue of which one to buy, and more of what features do you absolutely need now and in the future. Remember though, some of these features may come with additional costs like multi-track capabilities, but sometimes they're necessary. So do a proper gut check and buy what you need for now and perhaps where you see yourself being in the future. Now, if I were to recommend something to start out with, the Zoom H4n, H5, and H6 are all amazing interfaces that do multi-track, and they're just so darn cute. They are powerful little machines that you can carry in your pocket, and one of the best upsides to them, their resale value is always quite high, just because they're used pretty much across all media platforms. So let me know down in the comments, which one are you rocking? The interface or the mixer? Or which one do you want to rock? Let me know. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, punch that like button. Punch it! If you really liked it, hit the subscribe button and come along for the ride. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next video.